Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Hopefully you guys are having a great morning and have had a good spring break. Today we're just resuming with our lecture series. I'm just going to hang in there for a few minutes until 10. But good morning, you guys. Good to see you. Hopefully wherever you're at out there, you're doing well and staying healthy right now. It's an important meeting, I guess. We have a new topic that we're going to get started on today that will focus our minds for the next week or so. So it's an important transitional meeting and getting us back acquainted. But hopefully you guys are all doing really well. And we're just waiting until 10. If you have any classmates or anybody else that's not tuned in, let them know to definitely tune in and subscribe so that they don't miss the important content that they need to do really well in this class. But I'm glad to see you guys. Hey, Annie, good to see you there. I'm sure usually a lot of people start filing in right close to 10, and we see the numbers already going up, so that's great. So no rush, just hanging in there until 10 a.m., but definitely good to see everybody. Welcome, welcome. We're going to learn a little bit about the theory of knowledge starting today. That's an important and very fundamental topic in philosophy to kind of add to our growing collection of basic concepts in the field. So I'll talk to you guys about that at 10, but that's the basic plan for today and the next few meetings. Good to see you guys showing up. Hi, good morning, everybody. Kind of just hanging in there. Anybody who ever has questions, comments, or anything else wants to, give me any kind of feedback or whatever, just definitely tap in and hit some commentary in the chat bar, and I'll see what you're saying. Just as always, I want this to be as interactive as possible, so feel free to jump in whenever with anything. No comment is inappropriate or misplaced as far as I'm concerned. It's all good and helpful for everybody. And I see more of us arriving, so that's great. Good morning, all you guys. Going to get our day started off with a little philosophy. I think that philosophy is needed in these times that we're in. Good, great to see everybody. Just like 2 more minutes or so. Good morning, William, Annie, and others. Hope you guys have been able to, enjoy your spring break. I know that probably a lot of you were just stuck at home, but wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, it's nice to have a little intellectual break anyway from the burdens of our work and school, even if it's just I have a lot of work with all the grading and everything else, so it hasn't made much of a, impact on my overall day-to-day routine. Cool. So we got a good growing number. I see a nice quorum establishing here. That's what I want to see. We know that these lectures are live cast at the scheduled meeting time for our class period. They're also there for those who want to review them later or review them at any later time. So these are facts I guess we all know, but worth repeating one more time, I guess. Okay, just in about a minute or so, I'm going to get us going. To those of you here watching right now, let me see who's here. I'd love to see some of you guys just tapping in, say good morning or anything else. It lets me see the usernames of some that are in the room, and it kind of gives me ability to determine who's there, because I'm familiar with your guys' names and stuff. So just say hi. Good morning. Hey there. Good to see everybody. Annie, William, Andy, Bridger, Sophia, Emily, Justin. Great. Good to see everybody. Glad you guys are healthy and happy right now and doing well. Jessica, Brian, awesome. Good crew. Got our morning crew ready. All right, everybody. Well, Kaylee, Paula, Lane, Brian, Olivia, excellent. Okay, guys, thanks so much. Good morning to you guys. So it's 10 a.m. I'm going to get us underway. Welcome back. We're going into our second half of the semester now, continuing in this, online instructional format that we've, put together. Caesar, nice to see you there too. Yeah. So just a couple of quick little notifications, things that I've mentioned before, which I just kind of want to make sure we're all clear. I'm working through your guys' midterms that you took just prior to the spring break. So because of the fact that I have a couple of other grading tasks, I had to, put that in the queue. But I'm almost done. They'll be done this week, no later than Friday at the latest. So I'll give everyone a notification over Blackboard when they're all done and ready. And then at that time, anybody can simply email me with a request for their grade and the written comments, and I'll be happy to give both to any students. So just letting you know that the midterms are being graded, that they'll be done by Friday this week, and at any time after I send you the note that they're ready, just feel free to get back to me with your requests and you'll know your midterm score. So that's all now behind us, and that's great. The next thing that's coming up is the second essay. If you look in the schedule on the syllabus, you see that it's not due for a while. It's due in week 13, and this is week 8 right now. So we have a couple of more weeks to develop some new topics before I give you the prompts. I'm going to give you those prompts sometime around like week 11, and therefore you're going to have about 2 weeks to complete the papers. But it's week 8 now. It's due in week 13, and the prompts are going to be distributed around week 11. So therefore, we don't have to worry immediately in the short term about the next assignment, but you want to continue attending, taking your good notes, reading the book, and paying great attention, and then you'll be in great shape when the prompts are distributed in a few weeks' time. So anyways, just a couple of basic reminders about the pace and structure of the course. Nothing has changed. Our dates are on schedule. I'm just telling you that the midterm is going to be graded this week by Friday. And then after that, we will look forward to the distribution of the prompts in a few weeks after we go over some new topics. Okay, and hello to everybody again. Okay, so now let me just say we've studied a couple of important big subjects in philosophy to this point. We began our semester with the philosophy of religion, so studying arguments concerning the existence and nature of God, what attempts have been made throughout history to prove that God exists, what have been objections made against those arguments, and everything in between. After that, we worked on the topic of ethics for a few weeks, so like the theoretical study of morality and moral concepts, what makes an action morally permissible, impermissible, obligatory. We looked at two powerful ethical theories that have been developed in the West, utilitarian ethics and Kantian duty-based ethics. We learned about the differences between those two systems, and then we kind of used them as tools to apply to actual ethical problems, like the case of economic inequality. Do we have an obligation to assist the poor? And then also this sort of interesting dilemma and puzzle of the trolley problem. So we looked at ethics and philosophy of religion, basically. Now we're here again after the midterm, and we're moving into a third big subject in philosophy. And this is a topic that I'm a big fan of in the world of philosophy. It's called epistemology. Okay, so here is the term, epistemology. So what does this fancy jargon mean? Well, epistemology is a word which just means the theory or study of knowledge, of human knowledge. So the theory of knowledge. Make sure that that's legible as the letter E. I have to reach over a little bit. The theory of knowledge. Okay, so epistemology is the big branch of philosophy that investigates what knowledge is. What is human knowledge? How do we get it? What are the criteria or the conditions for having knowledge, and what things do we know versus what do we not know and why. So any deep analysis of the concept of knowledge is working within the realm of epistemology. So questions concern things like what's knowledge, what are the conditions of it, what is the difference between, say, knowing something and just having a lucky guess that something is correct, what are some important related concepts like truth, belief, justification, and so forth. So those are the big kind of important questions that epistemologists ask, as we call people that specialize on this topic. And I'll just tell you that I say I have a great interest in epistemology because in my own work in philosophy as a graduate student and a professor, that was kind of my specialization back in grad school. So you could even consider me as an epistemologist myself, since that was my primary subject of specialization in the field. At UC Irvine, when I was a PhD student, I worked with my dissertation advisor, Sven Bernecker, who's, I think, one of the greatest living epistemologists in the whole world. So I have you could say, pedigree to talk to you guys about this with a good level of familiarity. But I love all the topics in philosophy. Just saying that epistemology is one that's even a little more in my wheelhouse, so to speak, given my previous interests and focus in graduate school. And so the publications that I've had, articles and books and things that I've done, have all kind of been based around the topic of knowledge and epistemology. Okay, so when we start to learn about this, we're going to ask the question, like, what is knowledge? What's the definition of knowledge? And we will begin that investigation by looking at some writings of ancient Greek philosophers. You guys are going to discover that in the ancient world of Athens, Greece, 2,400 years ago, this discussion about what knowledge was already happening. And there are accounts of knowledge that have come down to us from that long ago time period. In fact, the first written account in the Western tradition about what knowledge is comes to us from the Greek writer Plato and his teacher Socrates. So the goal today is to learn a little bit about both the life and history of Socrates and Plato, but then also to kind of break down this writing of Plato where he discusses the definition of knowledge. So let me help you guys understand these two important figures in Western philosophy. These are names that are kind of like towering figures in the whole realm of Western philosophy that even if you had never studied philosophy or read a page of it in your life, you probably had at least heard these names somewhere because they're just such household names in the academic world and in the world of higher knowledge. So first of all, there's this man, Socrates. Okay, Socrates lived a very long time ago. So he lived from 469 to 399 BC, before the Common Era. That's like 469 years before the life and events of Jesus Christ in the early Christian era. So this is a long time ago. 2,469 years ago, this man was born. 2,489 years ago, since we're in 2020 right now. So it's a long time ago. He had a student that was one of the people that followed him and listened to him. There was a collection of younger guys that would listen to Socrates talk in the town square of Athens. Plato was one of them. And so here's his name and the dates of his life. Plato. He lived from 428 to 347 BC. So examining these dates, I hope we just are clear about one basic thing, which is that the reason that the birth year is a bigger number than the death year is because we're going further and further behind the Common Era. So Socrates, born in 469, that's 41 years older than Plato, if you see the dates correctly. So Socrates is like an important Greek figure who was a teacher and an important kind of orator. He had this ability to discuss things and get people engaged in conversations, dialogue, and debate. And Plato was one of the younger folks that followed him, listened to him, and was inspired by his practice in the town square. So let me give you, I'm going to start with a little history of Socrates' life, This is the sort of thing that you could study in much more detail if you ever want to on your own or in another type of philosophy or history class. But I'm going to try and give you the basics. I think that in an intro to philosophy class like this is, I would feel in a way deficient in my obligations if I never gave you guys some understanding of who Plato and Socrates are, since they're so important in the whole field. So I'm going to tell you about Socrates' life. All right, so let's go back in time. The year is like 400 and something BC. And in Athens, Greece, at that time, there was a town square. This is like a town square where people would go to engage in market-based transactions and bartering, right? Trade. Sometimes they would go there to just socialize and mingle and talk with each other. So you got to think of the Athens town square as like the ancient Greek equivalent of like a modern day downtown in a metropolis, except without all the trappings of modernism, clearly. But that's what it was. And so within this bustling, hub of activity in the Athens square, Socrates would set up, and he had a place where he would talk to people, and he would just engage people in conversations. That's what he developed this kind of impressive reputation for. So Socrates would go to the town square of Athens, set himself up, and he would just engage people in dialogue, discussion, and debate from all different walks of life. People that were all the way down to just everyday working people, peasants, and so on, all the way up to individuals that were, in the Athenian government and military. So people of all stripes would have discussions with Socrates in the town square of Athens. And what he would do is that when they would come to him, they would express a viewpoint on some topic. And then by the time Socrates was done talking to them, through this kind of gentle process of question and answer and rebuttal, he would lead them to new conclusions different from what they had at first. And so the typical format of an exchange with Socrates would be someone comes into it thinking they know something about a topic. But then by the time they exit the conversation with Socrates, they leave it feeling like they have a whole new perspective, or that they had changed their mind at least about what they thought they knew. So in one case, for example, Socrates is talking to this Greek general, and this discussion was, what is justice? And at first, the general had a pretty nihilistic, cynical view. He was like, justice is just might makes right. Whoever has the power, they get to decide what is so-called justice. What do you say to that, Socrates? And then, by the time Socrates was done with them, having their long, engaging discussion, he would leave that conversation feeling like, never mind, I was wrong. I thought it was just, might makes right, but now I believe that it's acting in accordance with virtue based on like noble principles or whatever. So he had this amazing talent at just engaging with people's ideas and leading them to new conclusions. So that was kind of impressive to a lot of people. In fact, there's an ancient Greek word that stands just for Socrates, like Socratic method, which is what we often call it in English. But the Greek word, which sometimes you'll see in the ancient written accounts of this, is elenchus. Elenchus is just a term that stands for Socrates' distinctive method of critical question and answer. So using this elenchus type of dialogue method, Socrates was able to transform a lot of people's ideas and to just open their mind and get them to think about things more critically. Okay, and because he was so good at this, he developed a following. He had these followers that were these younger men, couple generations younger than him. And what they would do is they would just go to the town square and they would just kind of assemble nearby to Socrates so they could listen to him, talk to people, listen to him, challenge people's ideas, debate, discuss. That was inspiring to a lot of these younger men because they thought, well, Socrates is a person who's willing to challenge received wisdom. He's willing to challenge authority and to put new ideas on the table. And they thought that that was so inspiring and cool that they liked him and they followed him. So Socrates did have some younger guys, including Plato, who listened to him. And why is it that we know anything about the life of Socrates? Well, the reason is because Plato and others wrote it down. Socrates himself never wrote a single word on a page. He was just a talker, a speaker, an orator who engaged in dialogue verbally. But if it wasn't for Plato and a few other people, we would never know about these things, because it's only Plato who took the time to write down the events and actions of Socrates. Now, those surviving accounts are called Platonic dialogues. And they're called dialogues because they're usually in a dialogue format where Socrates is the speaker and he's having a conversation with somebody else. They almost read like little plays, if you will, where you see the name and then a colon and then the piece of dialogue by that speaker in the discussion, followed by the next individual's name, colon, and then their contribution to the discussion. It just goes back and forth. So these Platonic dialogues have survived to the current day, and that's why I'm here teaching you about Socrates and Plato today. So there were those young followers of Socrates, but here's the thing, guys. Not everybody liked Socrates. As much as he had this loyal following of young guys that supported him and that listened to him, that thought he was cool and interesting and that he was inspiring, right? There was question and answer and dialogue, discussion, and everything else. He's actually corrupting the young people. So that's what some of these Athenian members of the government thought. They believed he's subversive. He's gonna, he's gonna get them to stop believing in the Greek gods, or he's gonna get them to disobey their parents and teachers. They're gonna start thinking so outside the box that they're gonna become rebellious against us, and we don't like that. So we want Socrates to basically stop. We think he's corrupting the youth. That's what the Athenian government said, right? So they made a decision. They said, we're gonna send a messenger over to Socrates. And this messenger is gonna deliver this message to him straight up. They're gonna say to him, Socrates, look, you have to stop practicing whatever you call it, philosophy in the town square, because as much as you and some of these young guys like it, we're worried that it's a subversive thing, that it's going to cause the youth to rebel. You're going to corrupt their minds. They're not going to believe in the Greek gods. We don't want that. So we're telling you now, you got to stop. And this is your only warning. If you continue with it and you don't stop, like we're telling you right now, then we will come back and we will press charges against you and you'll be arrested, right? So that was an ultimatum given to Socrates by the Athenian government. They said, you have to stop practicing philosophy. We consider it to be corrupting of the youth. And if you don't stop anyway, we will arrest you. So that's what they said. Now, anyway, Socrates, of course, defies this order. He finds it to be completely unjust. It's based on a completely false and bogus assessment of what's really his behavior and the value that it has. So he, steadfastly refuses to abide by any such order. And he continues to practice philosophy as before. Now, the authorities, know this, and so they do make good on their threat to arrest him. So they arrest Socrates, and they're going to now put him on trial. Okay, so that's the next step in our little discussion of the life of Socrates. Now, these Platonic dialogues, which if you ever study philosophy in another level, or if you want to just on your own go more into the writings of the ancient Greeks, you'll find that there are written accounts of all these things from Plato. And the description of Socrates' trial is called Plato's Apology, or sometimes just known as the Apology. So I'm going to give you like this sort of crash course version of what that was. But if you ever want to like inform yourself in more depth, you can go back and read the Apology and you can see these written accounts in more detail. Okay, so we're talking next about the trial. Right? Everybody, I hope you're still with me. I'm just talking about how Socrates was his teacher in ancient Greece. He had a loyal following of young people. Government didn't like it, though. They thought he was going to corrupt their minds. They arrested him because he refused to yield. Now he's in court. And this is all written in the Apology, which is kind of an ironic title, because apology, you would think, is someone saying they're sorry. But Socrates is far from apologetic. He's defiant to the end. He believes, this is completely wrong. Why would I be charged with a crime when I'm just teaching and practicing critical thinking skills with these young folks and with everyone else? So the arguments are being made in court by prosecuting attorneys from Athens, and then Socrates acts in his own defense. There was a criminal justice system which had a jury system back then in Athens. So in our contemporary American criminal justice system, you guys know, I'm sure, that when a person's put on trial, there's like a panel of 12 jurors randomly selected from the community. They're supposed to be like peers of the accused that have to render their judgment. Is this person guilty or not based on the evidence they present? Community-wide participation by almost every eligible adult male in Athens. So instead of having like 12 jurors, you got to imagine there's like a big auditorium type seating with hundreds and hundreds of adult male jurors from Athens sitting in. So there's like community-wide participation in the trial, basically. Okay, so Socrates is being prosecuted, and after the arguments have been made on both sides by Athens and then by Socrates, he goes in front of the assembled court, in front of the jury, And this was the opportunity that, okay, so back then there was a custom in their system that the accused individual would be given an opportunity after all the arguments had been presented to propose a counter penalty to whatever the state had asked in terms of a punishment. So normally the way this would work is that the accused person would go up there and say, gentlemen of the jury, I'm innocent. But if you find me guilty, then I would request that you minimize the penalty from what the state had offered to something less. So like in another case, if the punishment offered by the state was 10 years of hard labor, for example, then the accused person would normally go up there and basically this is where you plead for the mercy of the jury and you say, I'm not guilty, but if you guys find me guilty, could I humbly request a more lenient sentence, like maybe down to 5 years hard labor instead of the 10 they suggested. So this would be like where you basically ask for more lenient sentencing if you are accused, right? Now, Socrates was given the same opportunity according to that system. So after the arguments had been made, he goes in front of everyone in the jury and he says, all right, guys, you've heard the arguments. They say I'm corrupting the youth. This is completely false. I'm not corrupting anybody. In fact, I'm making the youth better by making them more intelligent, critical, and discerning in their judgment. So I'm not doing anything wrong. I believe in the Greek gods. I would never want anyone not to believe in them. So I'm innocent. But if you find me guilty, let's look at it. The state has suggested the penalty of death. They want to execute me, which is what the state wanted to do to Socrates based on these charges. And of course, death is the most intense, harshest penalty possible, right, in the law. So Socrates goes up and he says, look, I'm innocent like I say, but if you find me guilty, the state wants death. Now that's just too much. That's too excessive of a penalty. And so I'm going to propose this better counter penalty because a punishment should be at the same level of the crime. The punishment should not be more severe than the crime is. It should fit. So how about a more moderate punishment if I am found guilty by you guys? Not death, that's way too much. But what's a bit more in the level of my so-called crime? All right, well, I would offer you guys this. If you find me guilty, how about don't go with death, but something a little more minimal. And let's say instead of death, you guys give me, wait for it, free lunch for the rest of my life at the public cafeteria. Would that be a better punishment? That's what I'm going to throw out there. How about free lunch for the rest of my life? I think that would be the best punishment because I don't think you're paying attention. You give a punishment when someone does something bad, right? But I didn't do anything bad. To the contrary, everything I'm doing is good and it's nothing but good to Athens, to these young people, and to everybody else. So if you want to give me what I so-called deserve based on my behavior, I think the right punishment should be free lunch for the whole rest of my life in this big cafeteria. How's that sound? Now, obviously, you guys understand that he's telling them, I totally reject the legitimacy of these charges. I'm not going to suggest any counter penalty because I don't deserve to be punished. To be honest with you, what I deserve is some type of reward. And to even reinforce this further, the public cafeteria that he's speaking about, it's like specially reserved for heroes, war heroes, and like cultural icons of Greece. So he's not only saying I deserve free lunch for my whole rest of the life, but I also deserve to be revered as a hero of Greek society. So the jury hears his statements, and they go away, deliberate, and they come back, and they do return a guilty verdict. So they found him guilty, and therefore he has to be executed. That's the punishment. So they take him away. He's been convicted. Now, we're almost to the end, but we're not quite to the end of this little account. So if you want to read about the next part of what I'm going to talk about, this is written in another one of Plato's dialogues, which is called the Crito. All right, so Crito. I don't know, some of you will, some of you won't, but if anybody ever finds it of interest, Crito is another Platonic dialogue which discusses the following events subsequent to the conviction. Okay, so now Socrates has been convicted, and he's sentenced to die by execution. But the thing is, they had this cultural superstition in the world of ancient Athens, which was the following. They said if there is a cargo ship that is out to sea, then you cannot execute the person until it safely returns from its venture, because they believed that if you executed a person while the ship was out to sea, that it might somehow upset the gods, and then as punishment, the gods would cause the ship to sink. So they did have a cargo ship out to sea at the time Socrates was convicted. And therefore, they believed they had to wait for some time until it did safely return so that they could execute him in a way that would not upset the gods and win their disfavor. So that would have taken about a week or so for this particular ship to return back to the harbor in Athens. And that's why Socrates was told he had to wait for the sentence to be imposed. So he would be placed in like a chamber, dungeon-like chamber for about a week, awaiting the return of the ship so that the sentence could be handed down. Now, in that 1 week interim time period, what happened? But late at night, deep in the night, in comes this group of young guys that were the followers of Socrates, and Plato is among them. And they come in and they're like, okay, hey, Socrates, look, we don't have a ton of time, but we're here. We've snuck into the prison. We paid off some of these guards, and we brought you this. Look, you said it right in the trial. This is wrong. This is bogus. This is unjust. You're being persecuted when you've done nothing wrong. In fact, you've done something very good, and we just can't stand for that to happen. So come on, Socrates, let's go. We have the means to, get you far away from being imprisoned, and then you can keep living, right? You can keep living, practicing philosophy, spreading the wisdom that you have been. We think that's right. It would just not be fair, just, or appropriate for you, this great person that you are, to be executed in this way. So come on, let's go. Let's leave and escape. Okay, so that's the proposition given to Socrates there, that he should leave, and that they've got these chariots and they're ready to take him away. Now, I know that you're just learning this material and you maybe don't know the way it plays out, but maybe you could just give a guess. What do you think? Does Socrates agree and leave and escape? Or do you think that he refuses to, or what? What would be your judgment or guess based on just, I don't know, a hunch? He's got the offer, he's got a clear path, opportunity to get out of there, but do you think he goes or does not go? That's true. Yeah, he refuses. You're all right. He does refuse. So let me explain to you what he says to them. He hears the offer, he hears the suggestion, and then he says it to them this way. Look, guys, we can agree on something, that this is an unjust conviction, and I don't deserve to be executed at all. That's all true. But as much as I disagree with the justice of the conviction, he says, I'm also not like, an anarchist or something. I don't want people to disobey the laws of Athens. So even though I don't agree with the administration of justice in this case, I don't want to reject the legitimacy of the whole criminal justice system by refusing to suffer a punishment when the punishment is given by it. He also continues. He says, furthermore, I love Athens. I'm actually a patriotic citizen of Athens. I've lived here my whole life. I raised my children here. I served in the Athenian military. He says, I don't want to be marked as a fugitive, constantly looking over my shoulder. I'm 70 years old anyway. So what am I supposed to do? Escape from Athens, constantly be worried about getting apprehended by the authorities, and then also be regarded and remembered as a common criminal who refused to accept a punishment. So he says, I have all these reasons. I don't want to live as a fugitive. I don't want to have to abandon Athens. I love Athens. And out of respect for their criminal justice system, even though I do disagree, of course, with the ruling, I'm going to, on principle, stay and take this penalty. And he adds furthermore that he believes that he's got an immortal soul, that the soul is immortal. So he does not think that there's any real risk, because if he's executed, then his soul will simply escape to the heavenly forms where it'll be forever. So they reason, they plead with him. Plato says, come on, Socrates, come on, you really should come with us. How is it fair and just for you to suffer this punishment? But he refuses to yield. He remains in place, and so he doesn't go. And then the next day, the ship does return back, and after it returns, then they're ready to impose the death sentence. So they do. They give him, the method of execution was to have drank poison, the hemlock poison. So he drinks this poison, and there's a painting, I believe like a Renaissance era painting called The Death of Socrates. And in the painting, we see him reclining on his back on like a table, surrounded in a circle by these younger figures, including Plato, that had been there for his death. And he's pointing up, like with his index finger pointed at the ceiling. And who knows exactly the symbolism that the artist wanted to express by this pose, but it could be some offer the idea that he's saying, oh, my soul escaped to the heavens, or that truth is still out there that we should continue to pursue at a higher level. But whatever it is, he dies right there. And after that, Plato continues. And Plato founds, as he gets older, the first institution of higher learning in the Western world, which is called the Academy, or simply Plato's Academy. So this is like the ancient ancestor of the university. At Plato's Academy, he teaches a student who's a couple generations younger than him, and that man is Aristotle. So Aristotle learns from Plato, who learned from Socrates. So that kind of passes the torch of this Greek knowledge down to another generation. And then Aristotle, when he is much older, becomes a tutor to Alexander the Great, who then conquers an important figure, a founding father type figure in the establishment of Western philosophy. So that's why I wanted to at least give you guys the basic details on his life. I think it's interesting that he refused to escape from the prison as written in the Crito, because if he had, maybe we wouldn't be having this discussion now, right? Maybe he would have been relegated to the margins of history as a common fugitive of justice. But because he did stay, it almost, I think, made him somewhat of like a martyr-like figure for the establishment of Western philosophy, and therefore, I think, deepened his influence and relevance to the generations. But anyway, Socrates is gone, but we still talk about his ideas today. And we're going to then talk about the writing of Plato, which uses Socrates to express some of his own thinking about knowledge and giving Socrates' account as well. So, all right, so we are going to try and understand the writing of Plato, which is called the Meno. The Meno is the account, the Platonic dialogue, where Socrates discusses knowledge with a Greek general whose name is Meno. That's why it's called the Meno. There's a bit of a scholarly debate, I guess I would mention this briefly. Some people discuss how faithful to the actual historical Socrates is the figure that is depicted in these Platonic writings. Some people say that this could be the historical Socrates written in these accounts. Other people think that sometimes it's embellished and that Socrates is just being used as kind of like a character by Plato to express his own thoughts. But as with much else, the truth is somewhere in the middle. The Socratic figure in these dialogues is mostly the historical Socrates, but in some cases there may be a little bit of extra stuff that Plato throws in so that he can use his teacher Socrates as like a almost literary character to express his own ideas. But there is no doubt that Socrates lived at that time, because we don't only have the surviving documents of Plato, but court documents, and then also a playwright named Aristophanes who discussed Socrates in one of his plays called The Clouds. That's also from that same time period. Okay, so the Meno, anyway, is our text to discuss. And I'm just going to tell you that we will continue with the Meno discussion into part of Wednesday because it takes a little bit of time, but we'll be all good on time before we're done. To get us really into this, though, we have to start by learning some vocabulary when it comes to epistemology. So some important terminology and words that are jargon for epistemologists. So that's the first thing, and then after that, we're going to dive right into the Meno. So for now, anyway, I'm going to set down some terms for us to try and grasp. This is epistemology vocabulary. Okay, so the first big item in this list of key concepts and terms within epistemology is the term proposition. Okay, so proposition, the word, what it signifies is the meaning of a sentence. So a proposition is simply the meaning of a sentence. The meaning of a sentence. All right, so you see the definition there, the meaning of a sentence. It might seem like a little confusing at first. You might be thinking, well, what's the difference between a sentence and the meaning of it? Aren't they the same thing? Actually, not exactly. There can be multiple sentences which all have the same propositional content, or in other words, mean the same thing. So let me give you one example like that. Here I'm going to write down two sentences on this board. Okay, so one, simply the sentence, the snow is white. Okay, no big deal. The snow is white, easy enough to understand. The second one I'm going to write below, okay, it says this. Der Schnee ist weiß, all right? Der Schnee ist weiß. Now, I mean, maybe there's no one in the class that's familiar with German or the German language, but even if you're not, just based on the cognates that exist between English and German, and English is kind of a Germanic language, I'm sure that your common sense can kick in and give you an idea about what I'm saying here. We have two sentences here. It's clear. They sound different. They're written in different words and letters. But what do you think Der Schnee ist weiß means, if you had to guess? I'm sure you can get the right guess. It does mean the snow is white. It just means that in the different language of German. Okay, so you see that there's two sentences, but how many propositions do you think that there are on that same board when it concerns number 1 and 2 here? Those are two sentences, but there's only one proposition that they both express. So they both mean the same thing, simply stated. And that's something that you can point out when we refer to different languages. It's also something that can be explained even internal to one language. So like if we switch up the active and passive voice, or if we change the subject of the sentence, but changes the subject, would be to start not by saying I am in the kitchen, but the kitchen is what? What's the equivalent way of saying it by switching the subject from me to the kitchen? I am in the kitchen, or equivalent to that, the kitchen, what? What do you think? Trying to give an example of, a pair of sentences, both in English, but that they are equivalent in terms of their meaning. So, I'm in the kitchen versus the kitchen I am in, one way to put it. Yeah, I was thinking, the kitchen is where I am or whatever, right? Yeah, so does the kitchen is where I am differ in meaning from I am in the kitchen? No, it doesn't have different meaning. It means the same thing. One is perhaps more awkwardly expressed than the other, but they're not logically different in terms of what the content or information that they hold is. Okay, so if I say the dog is white, or el perro es blanco in Spanish, I'm not saying different things. I'm saying the same thing with different surface forms of sounds or symbols. So understand then that there can be multiple sentences which contain the same information or propositional content. And the reason we're starting with this definition is because it is propositions that are the subject matter of knowledge. It is propositions that we either know or do not know. Like, for example, we are the third planet from the sun. That's a proposition. And if you know that, then that propositional content is what you know, whether it's expressed in English, German, Chinese, Spanish, French, or any other language, or even whether it's expressed in equivalent, in the same language, but with non-equivalent words. Okay, so that's the first point, just to understand the meaning of the concept of proposition. It's the meaning of a sentence. All right, so next up, we're moving on from this. The next important, very key piece of terminology for us to get into is the word truth. Very big, basic concept, truth. The word truth, it's interesting because we think about the word all the time. We use it almost every day. 100% of us have said something along the lines of, is that true? Or we've affirmed that something is true. But even as much of a common sense way of using it exists for all of us, when the person asks you to give the definition of the concept, you'll discover that it's a little bit slippery. It's not so easy to pin down, at least not immediately. But let's see if you have any attempted guesses. And I'll try and help you by supplying, little examples. So what do you think it means if a proposition is true, if a sentence is true, in other words? What could the definition of a term being true mean? If some sentence is true, what are we saying about the sentence? Like, for example, I'm wearing a watch. Is that true? You say undeniable, Brian. Let me help you guys with that suggestion. That something is true does not mean that it is undeniable, because people can deny the things that are true, okay? Like, for example, the planet is a sphere, but there are people that deny it, even though that it is a sphere. So it's not just that it's undeniable. There are people that are going to stubbornly deny facts. There are going to be people who refuse to believe what is in fact true. So I'm wearing a watch and that's true, but I guess somebody could deny it if they were hallucinating, if they're on drugs, they're having a perceptual distortion, which made it seem that this is just all flesh tone. They couldn't see the watch from their drug-addled perspective. Okay, William. No, I like William's suggestion, but let me say something about Bridger right there. It cannot be proven to be false. When you talk about proof, it's not exactly the same thing as whether something's true or not, because there can be things that are true that have not yet been proven. So I don't know. Take the case of how many people are alive right now on the planet Earth. Could there be an even number of people living on the Earth right now? Meaning a number that's divisible by 2, an even number. Could it be true that there's an even number of human beings alive right now? Is that possible? Could that be the case? Let's see what you think. Again, question, could there be an even number of human people alive at this time? Of course that's possible. Yeah, it's a 50-50 possibility because there's a number of people alive and it's, an integer, it's a whole number, and those numbers mathematically we know have to either be even or odd. What's the possibility? It's 50% probable. But do I have proof that it's true right now? No, I can't prove it to you because I can't possibly count all the people simultaneously, but it still could be true. Here, another example, maybe a little more. Look, I'll give you 2 more. Aliens in outer space, right? Could there be some? Could there be life forms out there anywhere else except for the planet Earth? I would say it's possible. I would say it's, maybe even probable given the abundance of life that exists at least on this one planet. So could it be true? Yes. But can I prove it today? No. Now suppose that we get proof of it later. Like we have, a probe up there on Mars, like the Mars rover. Suppose the Mars rover beams back images to the Earth of tiny little life forms, microbial life on the surface of Mars. After that, we would know what right now we're just speculating about. But if that did happen, understand something. It doesn't become true when we finally get the images. It was already true metaphysically, like in reality, that there were such life forms prior to the discovery of such things. If a person, God forbid, killed somebody and buried their body, and everyone doesn't know where they're at, they're like, are they missing? Did they get killed? Did they die of natural causes? What happened to them? When they discover the body and they discover that there was murder, it's not like it only becomes true when the body is discovered that the murder happened. It was already true before. So in line with what I'm telling you, William, you had the right intuition with this suggestion that it is a sentence that relates to what actually is. That is a good way of looking at it. Let me put the definition up here so we're all clear about that. Truth is just when what a sentence says matches the facts of reality. Okay, so 2 things got to line up. What the sentence is saying and then what is actually real in reality. So if I'm telling you right now that I'm wearing a watch, is that true? Yes, because I'm saying it, but I'm not just saying it, it's also there. If I'm telling you right now that I'm wearing a hat, is that true? And it's not. I could say it, but it's a false statement because though I say it, we can see that that's not actually happening in reality. So true statements mirror the facts. If I tell you I'm born in the 80s, this is a fact about when I was born in this universe. If I told you I was born in the 1950s, that's just not true. It's something one could say, but it's out of order with what really happened. Okay, so whether we can prove it or not, a sentence like aliens exist has a truth value. It's either the case because they're out there, or it's not the case. Whether we can ever find evidence or not is a separate question, but what's true or false depends on just how things happen to be in comparison with the statements that we make about things, okay? Now, we're building up a vocabulary as it pertains to epistemology, and so far I've just helped you with two big terms, proposition and truth. The next one, and they're going in a specific order because each one kind of builds on the previous one. Oh, question from Brian? Then would those who think that the earth is flat is not, well, the earth in reality is not flat. I'm hoping we can agree on that. You've seen images, you see satellite footage, you see photos taken from the surface of the moon. There's so much evidence, both common sense and empirical, that the earth is a sphere. So to the flat earthers, you know, they have a false belief about the shape of the earth. Their belief is that it's a flat disk, but that's not true. So, you know, the belief that it's a sphere is true. The statement that it's a sphere corresponds to the actual shape. The statement that it's a cube, triangle, disk, rectangle, or any other shape at all is a false statement because it doesn't mirror the reality. So good question. Now, I wanted to try maybe to sneak one more of these vocabulary terms in before we close for today. See if we can get through it. And if not, then this is where we'll pick up next time. We got plenty of time to catch up in the next lecture to the two topics, two essays for this week that we're starting with. So definitely read them before Wednesday. But the next term I want us to think about is the word belief. So what do you think it means for an individual to believe a proposition? Here's a hint, the concept of truth is one element of the definition of belief. So what do you think it means when a person believes a statement or proposition? Like, for example, do you believe I'm wearing a watch right now? Do you believe that? If so, then maybe you can use that as a way of like reasoning backwards to the definition. Do you believe that I'm wearing a hat? I would hope you say no. So given those few examples, maybe, do you believe that the earth is flat? I would hope you say no. Do you believe it's a sphere? Probably yes. So what does it mean for a person to have a belief in a proposition? When you believe a proposition, what does this mean about you? And I guess the proposition. That you what? And I'm kind of giving you a little hint. When someone thinks something is true. Very good, Caesar. Yes, exactly correct. So that's what a belief is. A belief is when a person thinks that a statement or sentence is true. Okay, so beliefs are what you think is the case, what you think is a fact in reality. So if you're a believer, so not everyone has the same beliefs, right? But there's only one world. So like you could have one person thinking the Earth's a sphere, one person thinking it's flat. They have two different beliefs about what the true shape of this planet is, but there's not two planets. There's only one planet with one shape. So there's one set of objective facts, but subjects, as subjects do, can disagree about what the facts are. And that's why beliefs are subjective, but truth is objective, right? So like there aliens and outer space either exist or don't exist. And one of those two things is an objective fact. But we are in a position to speculate as to which one of those is in fact the case. So when we have beliefs, we can disagree. One person can say, I believe God exists. And an atheist can say, I don't believe in that is true. A person that believes in the existence of extraterrestrial life can say, I'm a firm believer that there's something out there. And another person can say, I don't think so at all. So we do, in many cases, disagree about what we think is true, but we're all trying to observe the same common world that we're all part of to come to the right conclusions about it. So beliefs are just when what is said is assumed or thought to be true by the subject. Let's see where we're at with time. We're running short on time, but we did well, I think, so far. So let me just give you a quick recap of today and then give you some guidance for Wednesday. We went over just opening the discussion of epistemology. That's about the theory of knowledge. I told you a little bit about the life and history of Socrates and to some extent Plato. Then I opened up with our vocabulary on epistemology. We start with proposition, truth, now belief. We have a couple more vocabulary terms to go over. Then we'll finish with the Meno on Wednesday. The other thing for Wednesday is Edmund Gettier, the American philosopher from 1963. He randomly, well, I shouldn't say randomly, but he is quite inspiring and important. He discovered that the definition of knowledge that these Greeks gave us actually doesn't hold up under scrutiny. It took thousands of years for someone to notice this, but an American philosopher in 1963 came to that conclusion. So he's got an article that we're going to also discuss on Wednesday. Now, they're both very short. They're like 1 page each, so I would hope you guys have the time to maybe get a chance to read them. It'll help you understand it a lot better when we come back on Wednesday at the next 10 a.m. meeting. So do read Plato and Gettier for Wednesday, and we'll cover them both on that day. But I guess for now we're good. So does anyone have any last questions or any comments? If not, then I guess I'm going to sign out for now. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Really appreciate you guys as we go through this, unique semester together. But anyways, take care. Have a great one. Stay healthy, and make sure to be back on Wednesday, and we'll continue with this whole topic. So thanks, everybody. See you guys there. Have a great one. Bye-bye.